A day of pain and promise, 20 million more put into Tier 4. The latest changes start at midnight, putting 3/4 of England's population under the tightest restrictions. But hope rises as the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine gets official approval, though the PM's reluctant to tell us how fast the rollout will be.
I'm not going to get into numbers, except to say that we're going to go as fast as we possibly can.
On top of this, the full return for most English secondary schools and some primaries is being delayed for 2 weeks. And in other news tonight, a new chapter in Britain's history. MPs vote overwhelmingly in favour of the Brexit trade deal.
This is the ITV Evening News with Julie Etchingham.
Good evening. Another wave of lockdown measures have been announced for huge swathes of England. From midnight, 3/4 of the country will come under the toughest Tier 4 restrictions. Most secondary students who aren't sitting exams will also have their return to school delayed, as will primary pupils in most of London and much of the South East. It's a desperate attempt to reduce a surge in the virus, which shows no sign of relenting. Well, today there were another 50,000 positive cases and 981 deaths. That's the highest figure since April. Our political correspondent Paul Brand reports.
New Year's Eve may be a chance to say goodbye to 2020, but across huge swathes of England, tomorrow millions will ring in less welcome changes. From midnight tonight, the Prime Minister moves much of the country into the toughest tier.
At this critical moment, with the prospect of freedom within reach, we've got to redouble our efforts to contain the virus. No one regrets these measures more bitterly than I do, but we must take firm action now.
That means from midnight, this map transforms, with the vast majority of England ending up in Tier 4, including the North East, most of the North West and the Midlands. Other areas, including Liverpool, North Yorkshire and Devon and Cornwall, move up to Tier 3, leaving nowhere in Tier 2 and only the Isles of Scilly in Tier 1. And as England locks down, many school gates will no longer open up. Primaries will now stay closed across much of London and the South East, while secondary pupils start an extra week later, but will return across all of England.
With schools, our best line of attack is to keep them open using mass testing tools that we now have available, so that we can ensure that children are able to continue to gain the benefit of a world-class education.
Though unions say the reward is not worth the risk.
Our worry is that children who are positive with the virus, who don't know it, and many children are asymptomatic, will spread the cases to other children in their classes, who will then spread it on to their parents, grandparents and the school staff. We think a period of closure would have got those cases down.
Tonight, most of England isn't just facing another cold night, but a bitter few weeks ahead. Paul Brand, ITV News.
Well, while 20 million more people were being put into the highest tier of COVID restrictions, there was some happier news to celebrate today. The coronavirus vaccine developed by Oxford University and AstraZeneca was given the green light by UK regulators. More than 500,000 doses will be available for the rollout from Monday, with 100 million in total on order. Our health editor, Emily Morgan, reports.
We may already have a COVID-19 vaccine, but this one rolling off the production lines right now is about to make the biggest difference. The Oxford AstraZeneca jab is safe and has just been approved here for use.
These are difficult times for so many of us, but vaccines such as this one will have the potential to save many lives and will see us come through. Having an effective vaccine is the best way to protect us and may save tens of thousands of lives.
The cheaper, easier to store vaccine than the Pfizer one will be rolled out on Monday. At-risk groups will get one dose initially, with the second given up to 12 weeks later. It means millions can be vaccinated much more quickly.
With the schedule they've recommended, that it'll be around about 70% protection for that intervening period till the second dose is given. And the protection starts a few weeks after the vaccine's been given, because you have to have time for the immune response to the first dose to work.
It's hoped this will ease pressure on the NHS sooner and allow frontline workers to be more widely vaccinated in the next few weeks. Staff shortages and huge increases in COVID patients has led one Essex Health Trust to put all its hospitals on critical alert.
I was speaking to a doctor only this morning that told me of a very distressing circumstance in his hospital yesterday, where he had 6 patients that were the next to need oxygen, and 2 of them were members of NHS staff.
There is no doubt this vaccine will change the course of this pandemic. The only question now is how quickly. Emily Morgan, ITV News.
As Emily said there, just so much rides now on how quickly the vaccination programme can be rolled out. The Health Secretary has suggested highest priority people could receive their jabs by the spring. But tonight, in an interview with our political editor, Robert Peston, the Prime Minister wouldn't quite commit to that.
I don't want to commit to numbers, but what I can say is that we will obviously deliver and distribute as many as we can, dependent on the supply.
But the numbers are there are 20 million high priority people. The Health Secretary has said those people will get it by the spring. That means 2 million a week.
I'm not going to get into numbers, except to say that we're going to go as fast as we possibly can.
And Robert's here, so why this reluctance not to get into the numbers?
Well, the Deputy Chief Medical Officer, Jonathan Van Tam, sort of gave the game away tonight when he said there is a world shortage of capacity to put the vaccine into little vials and packages. You'd have thought when we were bunging hundreds of millions of pounds to scientists to do record-breaking research, we might have thought about how we actually get it out into our arms. So he can't say precisely yet how much will be available each week. And there's so much that's confusing. I mean, I did a 20-minute interview with him today. Actually, you can see all of it online. He wouldn't say what getting back to normal actually means for April. He wouldn't say whether actually it could be brought forward. And then, after the interview at the press conference, when he was asked about whether or not there would be a full lockdown, he wouldn't even rule that out. He actually used an extraordinary phrase, this Tier 4, which is known as stay-at-home tier. He said he wasn't even sure whether it was working. These are very confusing times.
They are indeed, Robert. Thank you very much indeed for that. And we'll have more of Robert's interview with the PM on News at 10. And as he just mentioned, you could watch it in full on our website right now. That's at itv.com/news. And there was one other major news story today. Just the Brexit trade deal, then, agreed with the EU on Christmas Eve, is being voted into law in the Houses of Parliament. And our political correspondent, Carl Dinnan's in Westminster tonight. So after 4 long years, this is now happening at breakneck speed today, Carl. Is this really it?
Well, some people might like to think so, but of course this deal doesn't include absolutely everything. For example, services, which is 80% of the economy, they're not in there, and the government will have to go back and start negotiating on those in the new year. But what this deal does do is it averts the feared no-deal cliff edge for goods that was staring us in the face tomorrow. It has been incredibly swiftly negotiated. It was signed in Brussels this morning, then flown by the RAF to London, where the Prime Minister signed his name to it in Downing Street at the same time as MPs were debating it in the House of Commons. Pretty much all of the Tories voted for it. Most of Labour voted for it, albeit through gritted teeth. They think it's a bit thin, and it sailed through the House of Commons. It's now with the House of Lords, and it should become law sometime around midnight tonight. And after that, well, we won't have long to find out how well it works, because the transition period ends, of course, at 11 o'clock tomorrow night. At that point, Britain really will be on its own, in charge of its own laws and all the rest of it. And then we'll see how well that works.
Carl, thank you very much indeed for that. And that is all for now. I'll be back with the late news at 10 o'clock. Until then, from me and all of the team here, have a lovely evening. Bye-bye.